Hello, welcome to Miss Medieval. My name is Lauren. I am Miss Medieval. This is Sir Reginald. This week we are talking about education, and in honor of that, Sir Reg is learning about baby animals. It is a well-known fact that in the Middle Ages, no one ever used their brains, no books were written or read, information was never passed from one person to another, and everyone just sat around wallowing in their ignorance and filth. Psych! First off, let's talk about what education is. If you have 7 PhDs like David Banner, the Hulk, then you have a lot of institutional education. If you take orders at the McDonald's drive-thru, you went through training to learn how to do that job. Education is basically information passed to you that makes it possible for you to do whatever it is you need to do. When we look at education this way, everyone was educated for the job they needed to do. In the Middle Ages, those jobs had as wide a range as working in the fields to working in the monastery. I'm of course joking. Let's go on and learn about what you might have needed to learn back then. Now, before we get started, I would like to note that access to formal education had a lot to do with where you live. Generally, the more centralized the government, the less education was up for grabs. You can't go around having your common people getting all educated and causing a rebellion. That is so inconvenient. In countries with less of a centralized government, education was a bit more plausible, but still kind of unlikely for most people. A lot of this info is going to be about the English area. I like England. I live in England. It's great. Okay, now who do we originally start seeing reading Latin? Did you say the priests? Did you say it? It's the priests. While throughout the Middle Ages there were indeed plenty of illiterate priests, oh my gosh, and after the Black Plague it just got so much worse, but that's for another time. There is a sincere effort in many cases to make sure that priests were educated in Latin, in illumination, which is how you got those pretty little pictures in manuscripts, calligraphy, get that writing done, and all sorts of things. They needed to be able to read the Bible, so they needed to know Latin. Since it was priests who needed to do the calligraphy work, who needed to make the manuscripts beautiful as well as useful, this is who we see being educated. We're also talking about rich families who could afford to have their sons educated. Now, as far as women go, it's not quite the same story. I'm not saying that women were not educated. What I am saying is that women who were educated had that done in nunneries or at another nobleman's house. But that is not to say that women weren't out there speaking tons of languages, educated in 1,000,000,001 arts, very accomplished women. The education was just executed differently. Let's start with monastic schools. Basically, it's attached to the area where the monks lived, the monastery. The information that was taught in these monasteries was kept contained, hidden within these monasteries as well. Basically, the monks who were teaching kept it to the people they were teaching, and then it never escaped. Now we have a quick lighting change because my lamp broke. Let's talk about grammar schools though. Grammar schools did what it says on the tin. You went there, you learned about the Latin language and its grammar. You would go there when you were very young, under 10. Some schools would add in a little bit of extra information for life in, say, civil service, but they could really only be counted on for the Latin. The next one is interesting. There was also something called song schools. In song schools, they still taught the Latin language and grammar, but they did it without books through song, which is really cool and a great way to pass information at a time when books were very expensive and difficult to copy and create. It was also handy because it helped prep the young boys to sing in cathedral. Because as we all know, who sings better than a young boy who has not yet hit puberty? While we're on the subject of cathedrals, a lot of schools were attached to cathedrals because cathedrals were in large towns. Makes it a bit easier to get there for your education. Now, if boys did well in those schools, they could move on to university. Universities developed as the great masters who taught stopped traveling around and decided, hey, how about people come to me? I'm incredible. We start seeing a university in Italy, the University of Bologna, a few years before you even see the University of Oxford, which was founded at the end of the 11th century. Italy had a lot of good stuff going on, education-wise. So those were the institutions where people could learn. But what kind of boys could go to school? Generally, we think of it as, oh, you need to be a highborn noble or a prince or someone destined for the clergy. While yes, those were the ones who were much more likely to be able to get a formal education, we also see serfs going to school. What is a serf, you say? Lauren, you haven't done a video on that. Why would you bring it up? Good point. A serf was an agricultural laborer who worked under a lord. That is who they owed their service and homage to. If you were a serf in England, you needed your lord's permission. Who knows if you're going to get it? People are all different. If you were a serf in Scotland, your laird might even pay your dues for the school, so that's pretty cool. From around 1100, we start to see schools become a bit more public, a bit more open to more people. And we even see France sending over their masters and their books, their teaching materials to England to help people learn. That was really great because France had a fantastic education system. They had the best of the best at the time. They had some awesome stuff. By the 13th century, every school wasn't even run by the church anymore. Can you imagine? That must have seemed just so progressive at the time. Craziness. If you were very lucky, you might even get an endowment to go to school. Now, again, education, unless you were going into church or civil service, was really only needed by merchants. So you had a big focus on math, business, that sort of thing. If you were a serf and your life was going to be spent in the pursuit of agricultural labors, then you basically learned what you needed from your dad. Apprenticeships became the thing through the ages because that's how you learned. You watched, you participated, and that's how you became what you were going to become. If you were going to be the head of a household, like a young woman, then you would learn from your mom how to run a household. You got everything you needed to know without ever having to shell out the big bucks. So, in conclusion, no, there was not as much formal education available as there is today, but people still learned what they needed to know. There just wasn't so much massive advancement as we might find now. As time went on, formal education would become more valued until now, when we have fights over whether uni should be free, how much free pizza should be given out, how many degrees you need before you can work a minimum wage job, and all that good stuff. Fun times. Now, next time we are going to be talking about the Book of Kells, which I've sort of talked about before. It's a beautiful, beautiful manuscript. It is the end result of a lot of education, a lot of hard work, and is absolutely amazing. Can't wait to tell you about it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.